How do video games affect your brain? You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Here are the facts. The gaming industry is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. According to the Entertainment Software Association, 58% of Americans play video games. Some games may have budgets on par with Hollywood blockbusters. As video games evolve into increasingly immersive cinematic experiences, the moral panics of previous years have lessened. Old warnings about the dangers of violent games just don't hold the same weight now that gaming is a mainstream hobby. But what if there's a seed of truth in the panic? We've heard the old warnings before, that video games can damage you, that gaming can impair your vision, lead to a loss of focus, and even make you more violent. But how many of these warnings are real? The answer might surprise you. Here's where it gets crazy. Gaming really does affect your brain, and these cognitive effects persist after you've stopped playing. The bad news first. These effects do differ depending upon the type of game you play, and violent games can have undesirable results. A study by the Indiana University of Medicine found that 1 week of violent gaming can lower activation in the left interior frontal lobe and the anterior cingulated cortex, areas responsible for controlling emotion and aggressive behavior. But the question here hinges more on the degree of these effects. How profoundly can video games change you? It's not all bad news. Cognitive researcher Daphne Bavelier found that rather than diminishing all cognitive ability, regular gamers consistently do better than non-gamers in certain areas. Regular gamers can better differentiate between shades of gray, are more efficient multitaskers, and better at aspects of spatial reasoning. This researcher also notes that moderation is a key factor in gaming. Just as wine may have health benefits in smaller amounts and bad effects in binges, moderate gaming can improve aspects of cognition, while excessive gaming can have less positive results. Some benefits are self-evident. For example, no one would be surprised that games requiring teamwork cultivate cooperation skills, or that games may improve hand-eye coordination. So will playing thousands of hours worth of a violent first-person shooter turn you into an emotionless, aggressive killer with excellent tracking skills and no empathy? Probably not. And while the sensationalist warnings of some past blustering politicians may have garnered votes, they also oversimplified the issue. And world governments have certainly continued their research on the effects of video games, both good and bad. While we mentioned DARPA earlier, the US Army Research Development and Engineering Command also works with gaming. Eventually, this command is hoping to build a completely immersive 3D environment for soldiers. Governments aren't the only forces leveraging the effects of gaming. Corporations and the medical industry are also exploring the potentials of games, and not just as entertainment. Today, gaming principles are being used for simulations, rehabilitation, increasingly customized and unavoidable advertising, and more. But what exactly? In some cases, it appears that's still the stuff they don't want you to know.
Quite frankly, you guys know that video games do not cause violence. There is, in fact, no proof of that whatsoever. Studies have repeatedly found that there is no link whatsoever between increased violent behavior and consumption of violent video games. Indeed, if you'd like to fall into the correlation equals causation fallacy, that it would appear that many news organizations and a lot of very dumb people around the world trumpet from the rooftops, then you would like this statistic, no doubt. A report by the Secret Service, no less, a couple of years ago, found that the most common form of entertainment for school shooters was written violence, that being in 37% of cases, while video games only accounted for 11%. This doesn't even mean that written violence actually causes this kind of behavior, far from it. But it does indicate that, in fact, video games are the least common form of entertainment for those that perpetrate school violence. If you need another statistic, here are a few graphs provided by the Washington Post blog. This shows a sample of 10 countries for gun-related murders and video game consumption, attempting to find some kind of link, and what it clearly demonstrates is, in fact, that the United States is very much an outlier here, and the other 9 are in fact nowhere close, and the line does not correlate in any way, shape, or form. Or perhaps you'd like this graph. Now, this is the number of crime victims per capita in the US, correlated with the release of some of the more popular and controversial violent video games released over the past 20 or so years. Let's take a look at this, shall we? This was taken from CNN yesterday, and displays a rather violent and horrendous video game by the name of StarCraft 2, which is of course a sci-fi strategy game with absolutely no basis whatsoever in reality. Would you like to know a country that's a particularly large haven for StarCraft? Well, yes, that would of course be South Korea, the country that turned StarCraft Brood War into a national televised sport, a country with a massive video game culture. Would you like to know how many school shootings have been happening in South Korea lately? 0. Would you like to know how many school shootings have occurred in South Korea across pretty much all known history? 0. It goes on and on and on, and there are mountains of statistics that you can use, mountains of evidence that you can use that clearly shows there is no link whatsoever between these shootings and video games.